You are listening to Rootbound, a podcast about plants for when you're stuck inside.
Hey, this episode is brought to you by rhubarb, the only plant that's good enough for your grandma's pie and for mumbling actors.
Hi everyone, thank you for listening to this episode of Rootbound. I'm the host of the program and my name is Steve. And each week on Rootbound, I invite a guest who joins me on the show to share with us all about a plant that means something to them. And then I share with the guest about a plant that means something to me. And through this process, we can all learn more about plants and learn more about each other. It is the philosophy of Rootbound that everybody has at least one plant that is meaningful to them because plants are so integral to our lives as humans on this planet. Now, today, though, is one of those special episodes. We're not going to be talking about two plants because today, our guest chose one of the plants that is on my secret list of plants, and so therefore, we're going to have a special episode. We're only going to be talking about one plant. It's a really great plant, so let's get right to it and learn about the avocado.
Nelson and Murdoch. Avocados at law.
Avocados?
It's a long story.
Hi, Jane. Thank you for joining me on this episode of Rootbound.
Hi, Steve. So good to be here. I'm nervous and excited.
Wonderful. I'm very excited too. What plant do you have to share with us today?
Fuerte avocado tree. It is a tree that is about, I'm going to say 35 feet tall at the front of my house.
Sorry to interrupt, but okay. This is weird what's happening right now, Jane. But you're not going to hear anything now, but the audience is going to hear a little strange dinging sound right now.
Oh!
And that's because this is a special episode of the show where we're going to only be talking about one plant, and that's the avocado, because it's also a plant that's meaningful to me. It's a plant that's on my secret list of plants. So, yeah. But this is really great because I do like it when you say a plant that's meaningful to you, people talk about the plant in general, but here we're talking about a specific plant.
Yes.
Which you just mentioned is continue. I didn't mean to interrupt. I just wanted to establish we're going to all be talking about avocado here.
I love that you have a secret list of plants. I'm going to have to ask you about that. But basically, when I bought this house a number of years ago, the tree was already huge. And the difference is that the house was set back. The person who lived at the house before had built this house herself. Like, she had someone design it. It was a very experimental kind of environmental design at the time. And so when we bought it, it was set back in the yard. And there were all these plants in the front yard. This tree, there was an apple tree, kumquat, peach tree. There was this ugly blue fence around the whole property, and it was like Halloween. It looked naturally scary.
Because all the leaves were falling down, and
everything. Yeah. All the leaves have fallen, and there was just stuff everywhere, and there were animals everywhere. All the local raccoons, squirrels. Rats were all here to like enjoy each other's company and the trees. And so it was kind of scary. It was not really well groomed. And so we had talked about how to kind of renovate the space. And so we added a front to the front of the house, which pushed the yard, it like cut the yard by half. Mm-hmm. But we kept this avocado tree. Everything else came out. There was a lemon tree that we took and put in the back, but it didn't really survive the move. So we worked around this avocado tree that just kept growing, and we had to, by default, prune it for the architecture that we had to put up. So, but this tree has become kind of the hearth of the house. Is one of my favorite things about the house, although I admittedly know zero about how to grow avocados or plants at all. I hardly know how to water because I cannot keep my succulents alive at all, apparently.
I'm in a similar boat with that.
I don't know what's going on. It's crazy.
Yeah.
So this avocado tree, we discovered over the years that it's fuerte just by looking at the shape of the avocados.
That's the cultivar name. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay, I think so.
Okay.
So. I'll fill it in. I think that sounds like a cultivar to me. Yeah.
Okay.
Which is kind of like a breed in a dog, right? You've got right.
So it's not Haas. When we knew that up front, and Haas avocados are the ones that you always get at the grocery stores. It's the most massively commercially produced. And apparently, I did some research just this morning before joining this podcast, that the Fuerte is sort of a farmer's avocado. You know how some musicians are like musicians? Uh-huh. This avocado is apparently like the avocado growers' avocados. A lot of farmers find that this is the one that they favor the most in terms of flavor. But because the skin is thinner, it doesn't survive very well in transport. It gets really bruised easily. And so that's why part of the reason why that Haas has taken over as the most mass-produced avocados. But for a while, I think before 1930s, just soon after it was brought into the U.S. from Mexico, the Fuerte was actually a really well-produced avocado. The gripe with this tree is that it doesn't graft very well. It tends to mutate. And so it has not been very successfully grafted and, moved from places to places. And so it has been kept, it's a mostly Southern California breed, and it has kind of stayed that way, apparently.
Interesting. That's super. Oh man, this stuff. I took some notes too about avocados in addition to my personal stuff. I didn't get into the different cultivars because I know there's a lot, but I know California has a ton of different ones that we don't think about because we're just used to going to the grocery store. Yeah. And like you said, things in the grocery store have to meet certain criteria. Yeah. And one of those is shelf stability and like damage resistance and things like that. And you miss out a lot of cool fruit that way. And that happens a lot in the show. Yeah. There's a lot of fruits like that just don't show up in the store because you can't ship them,
I think that has really informed me in how important it is to really support your local growers, because in the end they're growing fruit that is not meant to be picked before they're ripened, so in a way the molecular structure of it has more time to develop. I don't and maybe sweeter and more interesting, and even just eating eggs from a local farmer right now, it's fascinating to experience the yolk. Tastes so different. Oh my gosh.
Okay, so this is really helpful that you brought up this local aspect of your tree and also trees in general, because I want to get back to some other stuff about avocado. But first, and I was trying to figure out the best place to do this, but first I'm going to be a real bummer for a minute here on what I'm going to share about the avocado, because I feel like we can't talk about the avocado without talking about this aspect. Okay. And it's informative. And it is a real bummer, but let's get into it real quick. And then we'll get back to some more positive
stuff. Let's go
because,
dark. Okay.
Okay. As you know, I work for this nonprofit environment investigation agency, and we don't do anything related to avocados, but because of doing work about conservation, I feel like I'm a little bit more aware of issues related to conservation. And a number of years ago, I was at this conference about like satellite technology, and I met someone who was doing analysis of satellites of avocados in Mexico. And she revealed to me this fact, which really stuck with me, but it kind of faded away, but it's come back recently. And the fact was that in Mexico, virtually all avocados are illegal.
What?
So there has not... So in Mexico, to change land to plantation, you have to get a land use change permit. And there have been 0 land use change permits in Michoacan, where most avocados come from, since 2003.
What?
And so all of this avocado growing in Mexico by Mexican law is illegal.
Is it illegal?
Yeah. And this is, and I was wondering, because this was a number of years ago I heard about this, and I wondered if it had gotten any better. But then just a few weeks ago, this article came out in the New York Times, and the title of the article is "Americans Love Avocados. It's Killing Mexico's Forests." And audience should read it. It's very informative. It's really devastating to read because it's not just about deforestation. There is organized crime. There's intimidation. There's violence. All the stuff around the avocado. And also it's the heart of where the monarch butterflies return to as well, as being deforested for avocados. And it's really because of the American demand for avocados, right? That this market is growing.
So what is the economy? Like, how does the transaction happen? Is it that the land, is it Mexican owned, or are we sending?
So it gets complicated, and there's some really weird stuff in there. And this is, I do like thinking about this, of how the complicated interchange of like global demand affects things, right? And the land is Mexican land, but there's many cases where the land is being stolen by the people who live there, by organized criminal networks who raise it and plant avocados.
Okay.
But the buyers of it are ultimately big American companies who know what's happening,
I see.
but are putting up blinders or doing whatever corporations do to pretend that it's not an issue. And this one is so stark because I just learned this from this New York Times article, and it's just mind-blowing. The USDA inspects every single one of these plantations.
What?
So we have American like government on the ground, and they're just there to prove that there's no disease before it gets imported to the U.S. But they're there. They're inspecting it. They clearly know that there's terrible things happening, but still we are importing. And in fact, I just learned this as well. This was in the article. I Googled this. In February 2022, U.S. paused Mexican exports of avocados because a USDA inspector received a threat from one of these local armed groups. But the trade resumed just a week later after Mexico gave assurances that things were going to be okay.
Oh, no.
Yeah.
Oh, no.
And so, yeah. And okay, so a couple just like key things from this article that I just wanted to make sure I mention. Okay, so yeah, it's loss of forests. Also, they're very water thirsty, so there's water issues in the area because of the increase of avocados.
Okay.
And then there's spikes in violence, criminal gangs. There was a pretty high profile murder of a land defender who was related to like the he was conservationist with the monarch butterflies.
Yeah.
It's a really big deal, and it was linked to avocados. So just terrible stuff. There's some quotes in this article from local people who like call the avocados blood fruit.
What?
Yeah.
So it's the economy of the avocado and how. Do you think that the government is in it their own way in on this?
Oh, I think both are, right. Both governments have
Right.
this huge demand, and I'm going to get to one really fascinating thing in a second about I think why this is happening. But this actually comes to it a little bit, and I didn't realize this. The popularity of the avocado has just skyrocketed really only over the last 40 years.
Oh,
We
wow.
eat 3 times more avocados as Americans than we did in the 1990s. Right. So that
Yeah.
and so that demand is what's driving this issue because
Yeah.
there's like a cash cow there. But then this is really interesting, and this is I think a really great example. And I think maybe one of the maybe positive things we can take of this is the lessons of like how international machinations can cause issues and you're not thinking about it. So the increase in Mexican avocados come to the U.S. really happened in the 90s, and this is according to New York Times articles, when essentially the U.S. wanted to sell corn to Mexico. Mexico wasn't taking American corn because they grow their own corn, and the U.S.
Yeah.
pressured Mexico into like accepting corn imports. And in exchange, Mexico was like, well, you got to let us export avocados. And
Oh, I
so
see.
it's this like it became this kind of like trade
Transaction.
thing, right?
Yeah.
And and on like a pure trade thing, that sounds great, right? There's a bunch of corn land. Mexico needs corn. We can't grow as many avocados in the U.S., right? That's on in the just pure financial sense. It makes a lot of sense. But when you think about the damage that's done, the externalities we can't control related to like land theft and deforestation and all these things, those drivers are there. And then similar, I've talked about corn before. Corn is no shining crop the way we grow it in the U.S., right? So you kind of have these two, and and as we'll get back to in a minute later, the plant is not the problem.
That's right.
We're the problem.
Yeah. I feel like that's forever the case with every industry. The second that we have a high demand, a trend, then we just kind of bastardize the economy that it becomes.
Yeah. So then just a couple quick numbers there, and to kind of share that even then the U.S. is still getting the better part of this trade. The U.S. exports 16.8 million metric tons of corn to Mexico, and we import 1.2 million metric tons of avocados. So it's like almost 16 times more volume of corn going to Mexico than we are. So just a sense of the scale, but still the scale of avocados, because they're a big tree, they're a perennial tree, they require specific growing conditions.
Right.
You can only do it in certain places. Basically the state of Michoacan, Mexico, is where the up until just a couple of years ago, it was the only state that had authorization to export to the U.S. Now Jalisco is as well. But that's, this one little state, that's like the biggest economic driver. And so there's actually all these quotes and articles about people saying we don't want to kill our industry, but the industry is like killing the state. And anyway, it's a huge bummer. and I think a couple things to take home, and then we can switch back to maybe some more fun facts of Dazzling, because it's been a bummer enough. One thing is, it's like, the weird world we set up where you just buying an avocado to make some guacamole in the store can be indirectly helping fund this like terrible system.
That's right. Yeah.
That's true with a lot of stuff in the world.
Yeah.
And there's something that's been going around the internet, and I've tried to figure out who coined this phrase, but I couldn't. But it's very like, I've taken something basically saying that there is no ethical consumption under capitalism. Right, because no matter what you buy, there's probably something bad happening somewhere. Now,
yeah, that breaks my heart.
That could be defeatist, but you can also think about it, but that the knowledge and the means are important. So here's the thing: if you can't afford to buy California avocados, or you really need to eat avocados for your healthy diet, then by all means, like, no one's saying that you're a bad person for buying Mexican avocados. But for me, I have this knowledge. I can afford it. I can forego it. I've been trying to, and it's tricky because sometimes you just gotta get some guacamole, right? And you can't. And you're at a restaurant, and you can't be like, "Where are your avocados from?"
That's right.
But just having that knowledge helps, and it's a burden, but it's a burden that I think I can take, right? To know this knowledge of knowing the situation with avocados in Mexico.
I'm curious to know, from, let's say I have this avocado tree. Of course, I can share it with my community best I can. It yields like 300, 400 avocados every other year. Beautiful. But with mass consumption like that, and the kind of dark arts that's happening behind it, what is there that people like us can do?
Yeah, it's that is a super tough question. I mean, part of it is making your personal choices and figuring out how we can, just little by little reducing that demand. That's hard. That's hard, though. I think we do need a bigger, broader strategy to, like, on a national level for how to reduce that demand. But I think what we can do, what I think for the audience, what they can do right now is, one, I think if you can buy California avocados, that's what I try to do. I've even like imported some. Like, there's companies you can get avocados directly from California shipped to you and wherever in the U.S., which is pretty cool. And, and avocado, California agriculture has its own problems, which we're not going to get into. But in general, I feel like that's better. And then also the other thing from Mexico, you can get fair trade certified avocados occasionally. They are pretty rare in the U.S. from my understanding, and the volume is like pretty low. But that is Fair Trade is an organization that certifies fair trade practices, including environmental standards, and because they cost more, the farmers also get more. And so if you can find fair trade, I've seen them like once or twice in the U.S. My understanding, a lot of them end up going to Europe. So we end up buying a lot of the non-fair trade certified ones here. But I went to a fancy supermarket once and found them. The other thing is if it's not the California avocado season, which is much more limited compared to Mexico, maybe think twice about what you really need avocados for.
Right.
Because they're an amazing plant, but just because they're amazing doesn't mean we need them all the time. And I think that's part of like modern culture with foods too, is like we forget about seasonality. We think we should have everything all the time. And so anyway, that's the bummer part of this program.
Yeah.
Of avocados.
No, I think that's true. We're being in California. Sometimes I feel really lucky, but it's also like I don't think it's natural that we get this much produce all year round, all the time.
Yeah.
And to have made such an economy out of it, I am determined now. Maybe I'll send you some avocados when I harvest them next year.
Oh, that would be. Oh my gosh, that would be wonderful. I would love that. That would be awesome. Yeah. So. And California has it's a pretty good avocado season. I think I forget, it's from April. It kind of goes through the winter depending on the variety. But I saw a chart, which I'll probably, if I can remember where it is, I'll put a link to the show notes. Basically Mexico has a year-round season for avocados, and California is more like 4 to 5 months. So
yeah.
But I think, okay, we can get out of the bummer side. I just feel like I had to share that. It's a very key thing about avocados. And kind of, I think, is just a really stark. I think we can learn lessons from the avocado.
I think that stuff is so important. It's important to know the chain that from growth to mouth. Like what happens, everything in between, so that it can really inform our choices. And as a consumer, a lot of times we Costco it, and we don't care. We just want volume, and like you're saying, I think this stuff is really important to kind of understand. Okay,
so that officially ends the bummer part of the program about avocados, so we can get back to some more fun facts and dazzling details. I have one that really stood out here to me, and then maybe we can go to some of your fun facts and dazzling details.
Yeah.
My one, there's a few other plants like this that we've talked about on the show, and I think it's just so fascinating. But apparently avocados are known as what is known as an evolutionary anachronism.
Ooh.
And that is the fact that they evolved to be eaten by animals that are extinct. In this case, probably giant sloths.
What?
And if you think about it, that seed, there's nothing that can eat that seed and pass it like seeds are eaten to, right? The giant sloth probably ate avocado, but then humans came around, liked it, and they're the ones that have kept propagating avocados. We're the ones who did it, right? It's this interesting, and avocado as the tree was domesticated more than 5,000 years ago, and the way that it is now is pretty different from its wild original avocado. But apparently, the original like native non-cultivated avocado, the seed is even bigger, so even more so for a giant sloth and not for
what is
us.
A giant sloth? Like what size are you talking about?
I think they're like 12 feet tall or something like that. Like they were really these massive. Yeah.
So this is like a peanut to them. If they, it's
totally.
Wow.
Yeah, and there's a bunch. I talked about. There's a fruit we have up here, a native fruit called the pawpaw. It's native to eastern North America, and it's a really cool fruit. And it's probably the same thing. Its seeds are not as big as an avocado seed, but they're bigger than anything native can really effectively eat and pass and propagate the plant. But same thing. There was this point, I think, where lots of animals and plants were going extinct because things were changing the planet, but around the same time, humans started learning how to cultivate. And so there's a few of these plants that are these evolutionary anachronisms that they still exist, even though their original evolution, the way to propagate, doesn't exist.
Oh, wild.
Yeah.
That is so crazy. Humans, we are a mess. We just
well, I mean, it's not so bad. I think the avocado is like an example of good, of humans being good. I think. All right, we stewarded this plant.
That's
right?
true.
Right, and I think that's that connection to the plant, like you have with your tree,
Yeah.
is really really cool. Yeah.
What I learned this morning is that it's a it's a fruit, but it's also specifically avocados are technically a berry, which I had no idea, and I think it's pretty funny that they're
Yeah.
all these
Let's go
gigantic.
gathering berries.
Yeah, you want a berry? Cool.
Yeah, that's fun.
So over the years, my tree, we had to prune it back a bit, and the health of it has kind of been a little hard to read because it gets massive sun, which is great. But there's one year where I started to see like these spots on the leaves, and I looked it up, did some research, matched up some photos, and I think I'm still not 100% sure. I think what was on it were these things called Persea mites that
okay.
Tend to invade avocado trees in Southern California, and so the leaves, like you go to a website and it shows you how damaged you are compare it to like a bunch of photos, and mine just looked like they were at least 70% like damaged. So I got a little worried, and I looked at what works, and they say that with these mites, what you want is to actually release predatory mites to kill them. But the tree was like 35 feet tall. Like I don't know how much to get, so I just tried it. They say that you probably have to do a number of rounds. So I got these mites called N. californicus from a mite farm, basically, and it came in a little jar with some French French fry bags with holes in them, and you basically staple them at different parts of the tree. And let them go. Like, this is your backup, and they will eat the other mites for you. And you know what? Like, it actually worked for the first year. I saw better leaves, but then I didn't continue because I had to be on the road, and so I think I have to redo this. But the tree has grown taller since then, and so I think I'm gonna have to get like up quite a lot. They gave me like a calculation of how to decide how much backup you need, basically, to kill the mites accordingly. And I'm gonna be doing this for the next 2 years.
Wow. What are the mites? Can you see the mites in the jar? Are they too small to see with your naked eye?
No. They're totally squirming around in there, ready to they're they say too on the paper that comes with, they're like, when you receive them, they're hungry. So get yourselves a stapler, and just kind of pour them into this bag, like here and there, and distribute. But I think,
do you get like mites on your hands when you're pouring them?
I mean, a little bit, but you just kind of like let them off the leaves, and then it's fascinating that instead of trying to kill the mites, you invite more predatory mites and do the job for you.
Wow, mite versus mite.
Yeah, it's kind of awesome.
Yeah, I'd love to see. I have to see if I can find like somebody who's done like microscopic video of this mite battling on
there is.
trees.
I'll send it to you.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh my gosh! Wow, that's amazing. Okay, so one thing you mentioned there, which goes to my notes, is you said Persea mites.
Yeah.
And that's because Persea is the genus name for avocado.
Oh.
So presumably they may attack other things in the Persea genus. So the avocado's scientific name is Persea americana.
Oh.
Yeah. So that's why they have that name. I love the etymology. Listeners to the show will know that I really am into like the naming of things.
Yeah.
And the avocado has a really fun naming things. First of all, I didn't realize that it makes sense now that I think about it, but avocados are in the laurel family.
Oh.
And if you think about their big leaves, and they look like a giant, maybe like a giant laurel. But there are a few other species of Persea native to North America and a bunch more in South America that are a little bit more like laurels. And a number of them you can use the leaves like bay leaf, a number of the other Persea.
Oh, interesting.
And I guess at some point, and maybe the wild avocados, you could actually use avocado leaves in that function, but the ones that have been cultivated, that aspect has kind of gone away. But I read that if you crush a leaf of a wild avocado, it will smell like allspice or like anise or something. Oh. And that's a way that maybe you can tell that your leaves have some of that property. So maybe next time you're by your tree, see what the leaves smell like when you crush them and see if you still have any of that. Yeah. So they're in that world. Unfortunately, the tiny little fruits of the other species of Persea in North America are apparently not edible. So they're much smaller too. Yeah. Anyway, I thought that was cool. I did not know that. But yeah, Persea americana. I forget the other ones are called, but the common names for the other ones are like called red bay or swamp bay, as opposed to something like avocado.
I love that.
Yeah.
A separate fun fact that I found out about my tree is I noticed that the leaves would suddenly drop before the fruits start dropping. And so I looked this up, and somewhere on the internet, who knows if it's true, they say that the avocado tree actually drops its leaves as a padding for the fruit to land on.
That makes sense.
That's insane to me.
Wow.
How does it
interesting.
even that is some miraculous stuff right there. Sorry, I almost swore. But it's mind blowing. It has such a almost a mother instinct, right? To drop the leaves so that but I have a gardener and they pick up all the leaves, so then it ends up just denting my car. And it just ends up getting bruised and squirrels get to them and all that. But I think that's a really kind of beautiful genetic makeup of this tree. And I don't know if that happens with dwarf avocado trees or avocado plants that are smaller, because I've never actually seen an avocado tree as big as mine. I've never been to a farm, and so I've never seen or heard of this.
That is really fascinating. It comes to one of those things that I've talked about a lot on the podcast now too, of like the intelligence of a plant and how what plants decision making in a plant, which is really fascinating. That's really cool. I don't know what you mentioned about the squirrels made me think about I think the main so we share about why these plants are meaningful to us, and I said we're going to talk about avocado, and I think maybe everyone who likes avocado toast or guacamole is meaningful to me, but me in particular, when you mentioned your tree, I kind of was like, oh yeah, twice in my life have had avocado trees.
Oh.
Actually. So I, used to live in California, as you know, and the audience might know. I lived for a couple years when I was a little kid in Ventura, California. And the house we had there, and I actually have some memories of the tree. But at the time, I actually didn't start liking avocados till a little bit later. I feel like when you're a little kid, this weird green mushy thing. You're
Same.
The same.
Yep.
Yeah. So I didn't eat them back then, but we had apparently, and I remember being in the backyard, and the tree completely shaded the whole backyard in this house in Ventura. And what only kind of thing I remember about the fruits, and this is my parents telling me years later, is that the possums used to come and eat all the avocados.
Oh.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wait, I think we got a fair number too. I just didn't remember eating them as a kid. But then years and years later, I went to film school in Ventura. And for a time, I lived with my great-grandfather, who still lived in Ventura. I was like roommates with my great-grandfather. And they had a mature avocado tree in their front yard. And for a good while during the season, every day for lunch, my great-grandpa and I would sit down and have avocado for lunch. So we had like some chips and avocado and just have it with some salt on the avocado.
Beautiful.
Eat it with a spoon. It was great. So that's my personal story with avocado.
I find it interesting that I'm talking about squirrels and possums. It makes me wonder, is the scale of ripeness and our kind of concept of ripeness just human based? Because avocados do not ripen on the vine. They are rock hard, but yet animals are like the raccoons that come through this tree are the size of like a 5-year-old child. And they eat so much of this stuff while it's hard on the vine. And so I'm so curious to know, like, is there's just the idea of ripeness of not actually across the board applicable to all species.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think, I don't know the details of this, but I know that ripeness does have a botanical meaning, and there's certain things about when the fruit can actually germinate, right? And you can't, and then fruits that have like fleshy outer parts, they coincide that with when they want to be eaten, right? So like a ripe berry is most attractive when it is most likely to be spread. But in the case of the avocado, that animal doesn't exist anymore, right? The one that it was trying to attract with the giant. So I think, we have other animals that are less picky, and they're just looking for the energy, right, to eat.
Yeah.
And so, raccoons and possums, they're a bit more, they're resource're, and so they're not as picky.
I just can't imagine it tasting very good. It's kind of...
Well, I think that's probably a human thing. Right? We're like, we want nice taste and really like quality things, and I think a lot of animals. Well, some animals are picky, I guess, but that's really funny. So that, man, I really that's such a cool thing about California, is that you can have an avocado tree in your yard. It's so amazing.
It's been, it's funny because the one thing about this tree, and probably my favorite thing about the tree, aside from the shade that it provides, because the California sun is so harsh, sometimes during a heat wave, the community around this tree, it has been mind-blowing to me. And I'm not saying, we talk all the time, or, my neighbors are super tight, but everyone that I've introduced myself to, when I first moved in and landed on this house, everyone said, "Yeah, you're at Pam's house, and with the avocado trees. She used to just like invite us in and have our kids pick. I grew up here, and I used to go and pick avocados off of her."
Oh my God.
And that sense of community and just sharing the wealth in that way. It's kind of like it's been really inspiring. And this tree has part of the big reason that we kept this tree is, of course, how beautiful it is, and how fruitful it is, but also like it means a lot to these people. Like it's a piece of history. And so when we were renovating the house, we didn't want to, we wanted to follow the roof line. We didn't want to change too much, but definitely let's keep the heart and soul of the street like intact, because it's a bigger picture than it's not just my house. It's the community's,
that's amazing.
Warmth. Yeah. So
that's so cool. Wow. I was gonna just that would be a perfect place to leave it, because it was so well said. But I have kind of I have a very kind of a funny thing to share now about avocados, which I just kind of learned today, and it has to do with the name. Do you know where the name avocado comes from? No. The word avocado is kind of a twisted web with a few funny points to it. Okay. One thing about the name avocado is really cool, and I really love when this happens, because it's kind of rare, is when a plant's name is based on its native name.
Okay.
In North America, a lot of the things we call plants, we borrow names from European languages because we have a colonial culture, and we throw away stuff that's native. But the avocado, the original name goes back to a Nahuatl word, which was, I think, aguacatl. Aguacatl, and then it became in Spanish aguacate, and then it became in English avocado. So that's really cool. Now, if you read on the internet what the word aguacatl means, you'll see a lot of sources that say that it means testicle.
Oh, yeah.
However, I did find a source, and I think this is probably more true, that the word aguacatl means avocado, and then that became slang in Nahuatl because of its look. So it's not that aguacatl, the word means testicle, and they called the fruit. It's because the fruit is called that, and then they called the testicles that, I guess, is where it comes from. So that's one funny aspect of the name.
I don't know. It's a little too coincidental, though, because they do look good.
Well, they look like... So what I think what happened in Nahuatl, pre-contact, they called the plant avocado for whatever reason.
Okay.
But then they started making jokes and calling the human body part after the fruit, not calling the fruit. Right, not calling the fruit after the human body part. I think it went the other way than with So
That's funny.
Yeah, right. I think that's what happened. And so now there's stuff on the internet saying that word avocado, that's what it means, but it's more the other way around.
I
It's
like
backwards.
that. Okay, I like that better.
Okay, so this is really funny. This is super funny. Did you know that the word in French for avocado and lawyer is the same?
Wait!
In French, you say avocat, which means avocado, and avocat, which means lawyer. It's literally the same word. Yeah. And this, as far as I can tell, it's so funny how this happens with languages. So there's this word avocado. In Spanish, they started calling it apparently at some point as avocado. I guess at some point they started calling it the word in Spanish for lawyer is abogado with a B.
Oh, yeah.
But B's and V's in Spanish are very, very
Same,
similar.
yeah.
So abogado, avocado. And so I think at some point Spanish specifically started calling the avocado aguacate to kind of differentiate it from the lawyer word. But that French wasn't lucky enough. And so basically they were calling it avocado in Spanish. Someone in French is like, oh, you mean lawyer? And then they started calling it avocat. And so basically the French borrowed it from Spanish when it still sounded like the word lawyer, which is a mispronunciation of the Nahuatl word. And now in French, they're stuck with having the same word for lawyer.
What?
At least that's what I think happened. It was a little bit hard to tell exactly, but yeah, the word for... And just the fact that abogado and avocado sound similar is just a coincidence in the way that it sounded in Nahuatl and the way that Spanish were interpreting it. But it leads to this funny effect where it's literally the same word in French. And in Spanish, it sounds very similar, right? Abogado and avocado sound very similar.
Oh, wow. The travel of that it's a mistake that stuck in that way is brilliant. Oh, my gosh.
It must be so funny to, like, be a French lawyer.
Yes.
And having avocados.
Who likes avocados?
Yeah. There's got to be like a nursery rhyme about that somewhere in French.
Yeah, I wish I understood jokes to understand some puns.
Yeah, maybe I'll see if I can find one in the show notes. But anyway, do you have anything else to share about the avocado? I think this was a really amazing conversation.
No, I love this tree, and the fruits on there right now are not ready, and they've been on there forever. And the thing with them is they're like enormous. They are like 2 to 3 pounds.
Whoa.
They're huge.
Wow.
But they're not ready because they get like enormous. And so usually for this tree, it's been like harvesting between January and March. And there's like a month window where every time I climb up, I get about like 80 to 100. And that's not including the ones that were bitten off and thrown out by the squirrels or raccoons.
Wow.
Yeah, there's enough for literally everybody on the street. And so
just the abundance.
It's crazy.
Yeah.
No, I love this tree so much, and I wish I was more of a green thumb. But so this episode has really inspired me.
Jane.
Yeah.
If you had to pick one of your songs that is most like shares the soul with your avocado tree, what song would that be?
What? This is the hardest thing. I'm gonna have to say Gilo, which is like a dark and moody. But the thing with it is it's dark and moody very knowingly. It has deep wisdom. The song Gilo has a very strong heart. It is unshakable. It has a pillar of an anchor of like a soul. And I feel like it really applies to this avocado tree.
While you've been here with gaps and waiting, missed a couple of summers, and I know it's hard to tear yourself away. Yeah, I hear the ovation for you, but I catch you with my black light. Still, it's easy to give yourself away. not miss much, then you're wrong. Steady hand to help this day where gravity plays. Fall, fall, fall. Just walk it off. You could be here through history waiting. Keep still for a moment, 'cause I know you and all you wanna take. I see you through your lips and endings. Must be wreckage waiting, and it's hard, but I will walk away. Her hair goes on and on. My God, this house goes on. You think there's plenty locks to not miss much, then you're wrong. And steady hand to help this day will gravity plays. Fall, fall, fall. Just walk it off. First things first, things first. First things first, things first.
My guest on this episode of Rootbound was Jane Louie. Jane is a really great friend, an incredible musician, and has one of the best singing voices I've ever heard, as evidenced by her role as Opera Evelyn in the movie Everything, Everywhere, All at Once. She is also a performer and co-music director for the hit musical Cambodian rock band, and the song we heard, Gilo, is off the album of her solo project, which is called Soraya. There will be links in the show notes, and you can listen to it everywhere you listen to music. If you like Rootbound and you want to help support the show, visit rootboundpodcast.com/support to find all the ways you can support the show, including supporting on Patreon. Rootbound is hosted by Avocado Bummer, Steve Ellington. Music by Christian Krikascota. Fake ads by David Lonnie. Rootbound is a podcast about plants for when you're stuck inside, but if you can go outside, track down an avocado tree and pretend you're a giant sloth.
Rhubarb, 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 rhubarb. It's